Now, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know what is the best way to announce a good day to people across multiple time zones. Anyway, today we are going to look at CockroachDB. CockroachDB is a command that people use to try out CockroachDB on their computer, and I get some echo. I need to move the camera. My gosh, I'm not prepared today. It's okay. It's a command that people use to try CockroachDB on their computer when they do not want yet to commit to the time to install the software and configure it on multiple machines as it should be running. CockroachDB is a invention from Jordan, who is also twitching CockroachDB on Fridays and sometimes Sundays. And now that it is rather popular, this tool has been recycled for multiple other purposes, between other things, for example, documentation. And therefore, our documentation writers would like this tool to be more deterministic to use. So in this particular issue we're looking at here, we see that CockroachDB is using a random allocated TCP port to start up servers. So how to explain this? CockroachDB runs cluster in memory with multiple network servers. They are listening on the TCP port because they are communicating with each other in memory using TCP. And when providing examples of using CockroachDB documentation, we have this challenge that we want the examples to include everything that's needed for the reader of the documentation to use the example. And the allocation of network ports that's currently dynamic is running against this principle. Because the allocation is dynamic, it's not possible in documentation to write down a single address, server address and port. And therefore, the documentation writer is has a burden to explain to the readers that they have to find out which port to use by looking at their screen in a particular place, which is particularly error prone. So the request here is to attempt to do something better here. The offer made in the issue description is to allocate, to make the user choose a port with a command line flag. The idea of this proposal is that by default, the command would continue to allocate dynamically, but the user can specify different ports. Today, that's not possible. Now, reading this this issue, we can do something about this, and there is some comment about this below, which we will review in a minute. Another very related issue to this is this one. The user that wants to use the web UI screen to view the dashboards on a demo cluster not only has to find out the proper port number to point their browser to, they also must log in to the cluster. However, the username and the password generated for CockroachDB is automatically generated. And separately from this, CockroachDB only supports form-based web authentication or cookie-based web authentication. And therefore, it's not possible to directly copy-paste a fixed URL containing the password to the web browser and hope for things to work. So that's a very related problem that prevents the user from being able to use information in the documentation directly without first making some steps to discover how to use the thing. So it creates really friction, and this demo tool being advertised to try out things and figure out how simple things are is not living up to expectations by requiring those additional steps. So we want to make this better. So in the first case, the way to do this better is to make the port selection more fixed. The request by Eric is to make a command flag happen. And Ben has replied to this saying, well, it's surprising that the command line flag is needed, because demo is supposed to mimic the behavior of a real server, and real servers allocate a fixed port. There is a default port and can be overridden with a command line. And so Ben's suggestion is to not even add a flag, but instead make the behavior of CockroachDB with regards to port allocation more deterministic. And that is actually possible. In fact, the source code, as we'll see, currently makes some extra effort at making the port allocation dynamic, and we could switch that to make it more static. Beyond this, then Ben says, well, we have to be careful because the default port number that is used by CockroachDB for HD ports is probably going to be used already on a random computer, because this is an extremely common port for a lot of different test applications. And so I see the wisdom in Ben's recommendation to not require particular flags, but I also see this particular pitfall here. So my suggestion will be to make a fixed port, but maybe switch the default from 8080 to something different. In particular, I'm tempted to make it close to those port numbers that CockroachDB uses. A question comes on the chat. How did you get dark mode on GitHub? This is via the Stylus web browser extension. The Stylus web browser extension is a utility that's available for Firefox and Chrome to add arbitrary style sheets to any website. And I used it. I used the find style here on the extension configuration here to find this GitHub dark style sheet, and that is what I'm using now. Separately, there is another one here. This is one I designed myself. That is meant to help with CockroachDB GitHub projects like this one. It removes a lot of margins so that I have more entries on my screen. I hope this answers. Thank you. So, port numbers. So I would like to offer that the first change we're going to make is to disable the automatic port numbering and come back to this fixed port numbering, and then additionally switch to a different default for the HTTP ports than 8080. I could see wisdom in perhaps trying 8080 and give a command line argument separately to change it from the default. Maybe that could work. I don't know. Well, probably we need port numbers anyway, because suppose that there is already a server running on the same machine and the CockroachDB command wants to, the user wants to use CockroachDB next to the server, we would get a port conflict. And so we definitely want to keep the option to override the default when it's provided. I will think about how to do this. Let's start by disabling the to not make it automatically allocate ports by default. So I actually don't remember exactly how this works, so we need to explore this. So run demo is the top level command line utility calls run demo, and that will check some configuration parameter, and then it will create what is called a transient cluster. Transient cluster is an in-memory CockroachDB cluster, and then it does some initialization, and then eventually it starts the cluster, which means starts the actual servers. For this, it uses a mechanism inside CockroachDB called test server. This test server is a mechanism used in unit testing, and we have abused it to create the demo code. The test servers are interesting because they put all their logging in memory as well. On well, they don't create files. That's really what's valuable for CockroachDB. We really would prefer our CockroachDB command not to create any files on file system. And test server has this guarantee by default. Let's see. So for every node, there is a test server args being created. And after that, the server gets started. I mean, it first gets created and then gets started. So I stand corrected. I thought that the demo code was making extra effort to automatically allocate the ports. In fact, I was wrong, because test server, by necessity, must also do this already. So it's I mean, I can see now the demo code is using the automatic allocation in a test server. So we have another option, which is that we can pass a particular port number. For the server, and that will also solve this problem, which is that the Unix socket was using a fixed port already before, and we want to change that. All right, let's create a little to-do list. So, fixed ports in demo, we want to pass explicit numbers to test server, and adjust the Unix socket name generation to use chosen port number. And then we probably will need some testing. All right. Sock for server. We'll fix that in a moment. So let's allocate those port numbers. This is a string, and I was expecting an integer. I actually probably want an integer. Let's go for an integer. Cool. Now we want to pass those ports, and later we will even fix sock for server. So how do we do test server args for transient cluster? There is in test server arg probably, I'm assuming, a place where we can configure the address. And here we are. Is the RPC address for use for the test server, the SQL address, and the HTTP address. So I suggest that we keep SQL and RPC address together on the same port at the beginning. So this is, I need to explain this. Cockroach server has an ability to separate RPC and SQL ports that is used for network security in different environments. And in CockroachDB, later we might want to enable use of this separation, but for simplicity in understanding what's going on, I think it's better if we just keep them the same for the time being. All right. So the address is not being specified here, and we are going to to add it. So we have a node ID, which is going from 1 to, I suppose, from 1 to n. Let's see. Node ID starts from 1 to n, yeah. And so we want to start to make the default port we're going to pass them here. Is this function used anywhere? Yeah, apparently it is. Yeah, so we have an issue, which is that there are places where this function is used for without context, and we want to have probably a test cluster, because we have here we have two places where this is used, and recompute the latency mapping. So what I'm trying to understand here is where to ensure. So okay, let's put this in the to-do list. I know that we will be fixing. We will need to fix that. So what happens here is that a demo server can get restarted. And then we want to use the same port number. So that does mean that I will need here to pass a flag properly. We're going to store that somewhere. So this is the first one. This is another one. We can reuse that probably. And here we have a test. Oh, the test I can. Oh, that's fine. Oh, that's very fine. Cool. All right. So we're going to store these port numbers inside, say, transient cluster. Oh, why did I copy paste this? I don't really like the auto-completion of code. I enabled it only a few weeks ago. I thought that I would become more clever in my programming by enabling code completion, and I start to feel like it was a terrible mistake. Okay, so we are going to allocate our port numbers, and here's what will be. Okay. Okay. So we go. Yeah, no. Cool. Now we can pass this. You're noticing that I am renaming this. I actually don't like RPC, because RPC really the user doesn't care about. So what we want is call it SQL, because that's what we're going to expose. The fact that the RPC port is likely to be the same is not exactly relevant here. And now we have this. and we are going to use it. And to use this, in this here, we are going to have 2 additional flags. And now we're going to add it here. And we use a node ID for this. Node ID is an integer, which we can cast, get -1. And now we can specify those here. Yeah, let's be. So what we're seeing here, yeah, I don't know what to think about autocompletion. I like when I press a identifier and then I get a menu, but the timeout is super short. I started using that, and yeah, I thought this would be completion. I don't have any. Maybe I'm going to change this. So let's make this 0.8. It's better. Yeah, I made it immediate, and now it's waiting nearly 1 second. Maybe that is going to be sufficient. We'll see. Cool. So now I have a HTTP port, a SQL port configured, and it's telling me that I have another one I need to configure here, and here I can just pass it again. Yeah, it's better. This way, this timeout is better. Okay, let's try this. So I changed my tmarks configuration to indicate which issues we are working on today. So the status line at the bottom now indicates which issues on the GitHub repository we're working on, if folk want to have some context. All right, so this seemed to work. How do I choose the number of nodes? Minus nodes. It is not happy about my choice. Okay, cool. So what's happening here is that there is another part of the code somewhere that is interested to verify certificates for demo servers. We'll see. So I'm a bit sad because it didn't seem to allocate the port numbers that I had expected. Let's see. So the HTTP port number was allocated properly. So that makes me happy. The TCP port number, sorry, SQL port number was not. That makes me confused. It's possible that I'm mistaken about using one of the two flags and not the other. So if you look at this function here, we see I chose to set only add but not SQL add. And that might not be the right way to do this. It's possible that we actually need to set SQL add as well. In order to check this, I'm going to go and confirm how this is how this gets initialized in other places. And the other place we're going to look at is start.go and flags.go. So that's the one I'd like to see. So that's where we see. Okay, so if the SQL address is not set, then we copy the other one and that gets initialized. So it's actually the case that I can't set one without the other. I'll take the word. Oh, that is not great. What's the default for the server listen address? I actually don't know. It doesn't seem to have a default. What we're seeing here is that there is some code somewhere that is sensitive to the relationship between SQL add and add in the server side. And what I had hoped is that by setting the same value in server cfg.add and server cfg.sql add, I would get this, the server to merge them together. And oh, and then we have this flag, split listen SQL. Well, that might be part of what I need to change. Demo cluster is the split. Split is not being set here, is it? Oh, ha. Okay, I start to understand. So there is the test server actually might be splitting the configuration already. So suppose it was true. Hypothesis. It does the splitting of RPC and SQL Server already. If it was doing this, then I'm giving it here for both RPC address and SQL address a specification of the same port number. The same port number means that the moment where it starts to listen on SQL address, because now we're assuming it's split, then the port number here is already allocated and we get the error message we just saw. So I'm going to check whether this server is already splitting its ports. This might be a sign. Oh, start tenant, not the same place. Yeah, split listen SQL is already set to true. Is there a way to override this? Let's see. No, I was maybe mistaken. Doesn't look like it's placed by default. Well, 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 well. Let's go deeper in the code. Where is this use? If I was able to know exactly what the logic is around this, I would be able to maybe tweak it. So if the PG port is split, then there will be a listener above. And if it's not split, the actual and advertised address become equal to that of RPC regardless of what was configured. So that seems all right. Then we have this SQL address. Yeah, that seems all right. There we go. So what's going on here is that if the SQL address is not specified, then it will allocate one that initialized to some default host, and it's going to be the listen host that is set here. Okay. Now new attempt. New attempt. I will comment this out. And see how far this gets me. This does not help at all. Let's keep the SQL fixed. Make the RPC1 not fixed. And split them explicitly. Do I want this? So what we're doing here is that we're saying that if the test server sets a SQL address explicitly, then we force the splitting of the RPC and SQL server from each other. And we won. We won. Cool. All right, one step forward. So this gives us port number stability, and that is already a big step forward. We are going to check that via tests in a few minutes, but I still think that we have a usability problem to solve. And that is if I start a server separately and I start to do CockroachDB, this doesn't seem to be a problem. Oh, that is odd. That is very odd. Oh yeah. It's not completely bad. I like this. All right. Okay. So what did I see here? My server here has initialized itself by listening on the external network address, and CockroachDB has started listening on the local network address. So that's great. Test server already automatically fills in the local address in the address field. So that's what we were seeing here. So I'm not getting a conflict with an externally started server, which is pretty good usability. The only way now I could see a conflict is if I start CockroachDB a second time on the same machine. And that's okay. That's okay. All right. So I'm 70% on the way there. And now we are going to be happy with the demo using the configuration ports of the server by default. And we will also support an override with a command line. We can override the port number, but not the full address. So how does this happen? Ports. So we have these flags that are called deprecated. Let's add some flags. Demo. How to explain this? We want a text that says that the user must have as many ports available as passed by the nodes command. Well, that's maybe what I should just write first. Should be as many TCP numbers available starting at this number specified value as there are value of nodes. There we go. And then we're going to do the same for HTTP ports. Okay. And now we're going to connect those. Okay. And then connect those via the command line. All right. Our port numbers are allocated at a fixed range. CHT port as well, and if overloaded, it is allocated from the range we specify for SQL, and then HTTP port, yep. Off we go. Okay, so the configuration is available. What about the help text? Does it look nice? First port number for SQL Server should be as many TCP port number available. Port numbers available. The name. There should be as many TCP ports available. Starting at specified as many as the value of a node starting at a specified value. That's easier to read and understand. HTTP is also there, I suppose. All right. I'm happy with this. Cool. Cool. All right, so now the port numbers are allocated, and we had a to-do that is done. That one we probably have done already. Let's check it. Oh. Internal server error node 2 is already running. It's because it needs to be first to be shut down, and only after that can be started again. And it was started at the same address. Okay, so the address reuse is okay. So we're done with this. Adjust the Unix socket name generation to use the chosen port numbers. Yeah. So what we saw is that we had a socket, Unix socket details here with a port number that's odd. So where is this coming from? We had that function sock, where is it? Sock for server. And where is that function used? So sock for server is used if c.useSocket is enabled. So that is a method on the transient cluster, and here we have another method on the transient cluster. Well, that sounds alright because our transient cluster has this default port. First. So we saw actually this was an issue before. If I scroll back a little bit to a previous test, previous test would be here. I had configured the SQL port with this command line here, and subsequently the Unix socket specification was still using this port number, the previous value. So we didn't have the same port number here and here, which is odd and would also make running multiple demo servers concurrently a problem because they would overwrite each other Unix sockets. And so now I am expecting the Unix socket to be configured properly, and it is. This is good. We have achieved this this fix, but now we need to test all this. So we have 3 things to test. Number 1, that the port number for SQL can be configured. So number 2 is that HTTP port can be configured. Number 3 is that the Unix socket is compatible. So we have 3 different ways to test this. We can test the command line argument parsing to verify that the command line argument is passed into the struct. That's one type of test. And then there is another test we need is to test that the value inside the struct is passed to the server. We don't have many of those tests around, I think. Actually, maybe we do. Test server args for transient cluster. Sure. So we could add a test for this here. That if the flag is in the democtx struct, then it gets propagated. But we don't have any of those tests. I actually prefer to have end-to-end testing for this kind of change. And for this we have demo testing in a directory called interactive tests. So we have multiple types of commands. And we are going to check Set support numbers by default are set properly. When support numbers are not specified, and then we are going to verify that we can override them. Okay, and then the secure case, we also have the same. And then we're going to check at the end that we have sorry about that. Let's make it a more funny number. And we also want to check the Unix socket. And then the TCP port. Off we go. Let's test this. So testing those things on the command line is easiest done with Docker, but I don't like the startup time. So I like to test those things on my command line directly, which is much faster. And the test passed. We can see that it was able to observe the strings we wanted. Cool. We are done for this change. So now it's time to create a PR. and send it for review. Trick question will be who can reuse this, but we'll see. What was there before? Why it needs to change? What I did about it, deterministic. And there is an argument here that needs to be addressed here. So there was concerns as this allocation root cause conflict on the same machine. So it proved to less likely in practice. Servers tend to listen on the external IP address node, whereas always listens is possible for both processes to listen all the same TCP port number, separate addresses. And now there is a little challenge, which is the release note. A release note is sorry about slide. A release note needs to explain what was just written above. So it's essentially a user visible summary of what just happened. I did not create a branch. That's to do. Let's do that. Why do I use a requester in my description in addition to linking to the other issue? It's because this way the person who requested the feature gets a notification. So they would not by just linking the issue like this. Oliver is the most knowledgeable person on the demo code, so I'm trusting him to be able to review this. Cool. So that's one of the two projects we had for today. Pretty happy where this got us. We're going to rewind that master branch. There we go. And we can now close this and this, and we can focus on this one. So we have completed one task, and we're going to look at the other one, but it has been 1 hour, and programming for more than 1 hour sitting on a chair is not healthy. So it is time for a little break for stretching. We will see each other in a few minutes again. Shall we break? I don't know how to switch scenes with this. I'm supposed to have a shortcut on my keyboard. And we are back. Cool. All right, so this issue here is about starting the UI screen when we are in a demo session. So in order to demonstrate this, I need a binary with, say, UI screens built in, which I don't have by default, so this triggers that. So what's going on? I have this URL. Did I not just implement a PR to make those port numbers allocated? Not automatically? Oh, I changed branches. That's why. Let's come back to my branch. Yeah. Our web browser is inviting us to log in, and it's a demo session. It's also confusing us a little bit by saying we need to create a user and so on, which might suggest to enter this here. So ideally, we want the URL that is printed by the CockroachDB command to automatically log the user in. We have here a password. It's maybe arbitrarily long. We're not going to discuss the length. What really is important is that the user doesn't need to copy paste the password in addition to copy pasting the URL. We're assuming they're already making a step. They're making a step to bring information from their terminal into their browser, and they should not have to do this twice. So just copy pasting the URL should be sufficient. And therefore, it would be nice if something in the URL was causing the server to automatically log the user in. So we can do this in two different ways. We can either have a special URL parameter at the end, which would convey some authentication credentials, and then proceed to create the authentication cookie from that and redirect the web browser to the UI homepage. That is one way to do this, and it is rather straightforward to understand, perhaps. However, it has a usability paper cut to it, and that is that if the documentation writer who wants to use demo to illustrate different UI screens wants to give a URL that points directly to one of the UI screens, then this method here would not work. If we want to point to a UI screen directly, that works with a credential. Wait. But yeah, the documentation writer will not be able to write a URL with the authentication credentials inside, because each demo shell has different credentials. So maybe the documentation writer is not going to invite the user to demo page, to UI page directly without going first to the home page that is auto logged in. So let's keep it simple for time being. So what we're going to do is an auto login URL in the server that is given, say, username and password as parameters. We can do this in two ways. Either pass the user and password on the query string or as part of the URL, or maybe pass it as username and password prefix, which would correspond to HTTP basic authentication. I believe that HTTP basic authentication is better, strictly better, because in a networked environment it's customary for firewall software or maybe protection software or any proxy software the user may be using to collect the parts after the path in the URL in logs and so on. And so for privacy and security, it seems to me that user passwords that are passed as part of the HTTP authentication are not going to be logged. So my intuition is to try to use basic authentication. However, it doesn't really matter too much which scheme we're going to implement. Because from a complexity code programming perspective, it is similar in complexity. So what I suggest to do is to try to experiment a little bit and find something that works and then submit it as an MVP for review and then gather input from stakeholders about which schemes they prefer by presenting the alternatives to them. And then only after we get some feedback, we can choose one of the solutions that is better than the others. So how do we make a server? So it's an area in CockroachDB that is likely to change in the future, because we want to rework the ways that CockroachDB serves HTTP APIs. But it doesn't matter too much. We're going to use the current mechanism nevertheless. Start serve UI. That's probably where I want to go. And then it has some server mux for health. And it passes S directly as a server. So how does this work? I don't know. So what this does is that wait. Has this changed recently? Doesn't seem to. This probably doesn't work. We'll see. Manager. Okay, so I will admit my ignorance. I actually don't exactly know how the request routing is happening in this. So this is serving the HTTP endpoint with the con manager. What's the con manager? Oh, it's netutil.server. What is the netutil.server? Oh, it's something that implements HTTP server. Okay, so we have in the function that calls this con manager. And it says netutil make server. Make server, what does this do? Oh, it installs HTTP handler. Okay, and what is an HTTP handler? It does serve HTTP. Ah, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So there is a server HTTP here. All right, so that's where the server is getting its HTTP request from. Okay, so it says none of the pages can be cached. It also says that if it supports gzip, then it will compress the response as allowed by the browser, the web browser. This makes it possible to send us compressed data back to the browser. And then it dispatches the request processing to the mux. Cool. So there is a server mux. What is mux? It's a serve mux. That doesn't help me much. Where is it defined? Oh, mux is being defined in places. So that's where it's happening. That's where everything is happening. So there are handle requests for different paths here. And that does UI handler. Hello anonymous. Okay. And then there are some things that are not being authenticated. And there is an auth handler. New authentication mux. So what does this do? It verifies there is a session, and if there isn't, it redirects to another page. Well, I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to implement some URLs that does a auto login feature for the demo session. So here we're starting that the new structure defining implements the serve HTTP method, or the HTTP server interface. And I don't remember how it looks like, but I'm going to steal it from here. Okay. Come on. Cool. All right. And so here we're going to send a response that is an error. I don't remember exactly how this works. What's the response writer? Right header. Does that work? Let's try this. Let's try this. So what we're doing here, we have a new endpoint on the server. And we want to verify in the web browser that it's recognized by verifying that we're getting the status code 566. And it's telling me that I can't use it in as type http.server. And now? Oh, it's http.handler. Yeah, that seems to work. server running. Good link. All right. And I'm going to do auto login here. This is not succeeding, is it? Let's try with the curl command. Oh my. I have my curl is not happy. That sounds like a custom built curl. Let's see what it says. It seems that our server or something is not giving us a response in the right shape. How do I... Is that the way it works? Context. Something like this. Yeah, okay, so our thing works. All right. So we have a request, and probably we might have some authentication information inside. We have a header inside. So we are going to print out the header for what I'm doing here. I want to verify whether the information define pretty, why is that? Whether the information that is I don't know why I don't have Go imports. It might be, it doesn't matter. The information that that is passed by the basic authentication scheme is present in the header. If it is, then I suggest we just go ahead and use that directly. That's the most intuitive way to do it. And if it's not there, we're going to use the URL argument or query string. So if I say foo bar this, we get connection keep alive user agent. That did not seem to work. That is not great at all. That is not great at all. Not great at all. I was expecting many more fields in my header. Maybe it got extracted somewhere else. Connection state, no, request URI, trailer, multi-post form, host, close, transfer encoding, get body. Maybe in the URL, maybe the field has been printed already. Let's print the entire request just for fun and profit. It's a bit the first time I play around with Go as a HTTP server to do some authentication related stuff. It's not my primary center of expertise. Okay, now we have more data here. So I passed foobar in the URL. Do I have foo? No, I don't. Okay, so the authentication information in the URL is not passed by wget. Is it passed by web browser? But the website does not require authentication. This may be an attempt to trick you. Oh. Okay. All right, so the web browser does not send authentication unless the server requires it. We're going to learn about HTTP basic authentication. I expect the server has to send a request, and then, yeah, that's what we need. 401. 401. So we're going to do this, maybe. I don't know if I can pass them all in one string or whether I should split them at a comma. We'll hope. And now we can try again. So what's happening here is that we are asking the server to tell the HTTP client, please send authentication information. That might trick both the browser and wget to actually pass this data along. And again, it did not work. I should have a command to kill the program if it's running already when I try to link. used it. Yeah, sounds all right. All right. So, but I'm not seeing it anymore here, so that's okay. I'm going to write it in the information log. Cool. I have too much data in my request. Let's print only the header. Yeah. The second time around, we got an authorization header. And it contains something. So what is this? I suppose it's base64. And the base64 command. Oh, come on. Maybe I have one here. Yeah. The code. Yes. Yeah. So the base authentication scheme provides us a header with that scheme. So we're going to do it as follow. It's called basic, right? Basic, yeah. Then for 1 and maybe redirect. Redirect seems good. No, 4.1. 4.1. I really want. Okay, I didn't want to erase everything here. So access, and then right header 4.1, and then the text. Okay, so we have a basic string here. So we're going to extract it. So potentials. And now we're going to use them. There's something wrong with my configurations that it doesn't automatically include Go packages that were not included before. It's okay. So we're going to do something here, which is not written yet. And at the end, we're going to do either HTTP redirect. I want to 301 or 303, I think. 302 found. I want that. And I need to give it a header to say what is the destination of the link. Found location. All right. Okay. This one's a regular Go string. And there will be a cookie in between. Cookie. The cookie, I don't remember how it gets done, but there is a login endpoint. Login path, yes. And the login path is going to give us work as a place. There is a login, user login, RPC that does things. Okay. And now we're going to do things like this. Create session for, and there will be a cookie, and then we copy paste this. Username as case sensitive, security, and so there will be a username. And then verified expired. Password is plus here. So if there's an error, then we are going to have an error here. What does API internal error do? It does an error. Okay. If expired. We are going to continue writing this. There's probably some factoring possible, but this is Go. Unfortunately, Go has some odd ideas about copy pasting and so on. So it's common to copy paste code until later when folk decide to do it differently. Right. I do not need depth, so it's 2 because I'm already in the right function. Then we have a set header. Set cookie.string. And I think I'm done. Start with is in Python, and in Go is called as prefix. Can you use auth header? Right. Split n. Oh yeah. Then it says s. Yes, a.s. So I just created a test user, which is going to be slightly easier to enter than this. So what do we get? Do I get verbose errors with wget? Let's see. Verbose. I want to see maybe with D. Cool. I'm getting better. Auto login, accept encoding, basics, this. And then I got a response begin unauthorized with an error. Okay, so what's going on here is that I forgot that my credentials here are base63 encoded. I don't remember in which modules it's defined. Encoding. It's already there. And I have a decode. I need a new decoder. Nah. So it must be a simple Is there a simple decode function maybe I can use? Oh. New encoding. Decode string. That sounds about right. Let's do this. Expecting. It's called authorization, not authentication. Ah, typos. The thing doesn't like me. Authorization basic. I have the header. Look at this. I was not looking at the header in the request. I was looking at the header in the response. That is a mistake, and I discovered the mistake by reading my own code. It says you can use the UI now. So actually it went on and on and on. That's because I forgot a few return statements. All this would look better if I was using a helper function for my error messages. But until we get there, this is the next best thing. Look at this. basic authentication succeeded. I get 302 found, set cookie, redirect, and then move to a separate URL. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. It has worked. It has worked. Completely worked. This is a party. Now, this is not exactly the final solution we are going to preserve, but in the meantime, we can have a proof of concept for the purpose of creating a screenshot for the reviewer. And this is where we need to tweak this. So the admin URL is going to have something different to it. Where are the credentials? Here's the passwords. Passwords. Where are the passwords? Transient cluster. Admin user. Password admin user. So user info with small letters. Oh, okay. Name spacing. URL. Small letters refers to the package name. And that looks better. And I need to do user passwords. And this might be done. How come? Admin user? What's it? It's a username, it's not a string. Look at this. Connection parameters with an auto login. And it worked. It completely worked. And I'm using the demo user. Okay, this is very MVP. And it's definitely not review ready. but I want to have the MVP for discussion about the economics. And depending on the approval on the economics, we can refine this code later. Previous to this patch, a demo cluster was running. The user of CockroachDB had to perform 2 copy-paste operations from their terminal. One to copy the URL into their browser, and another one to copy the authentication. It was inconvenient as it has created friction to exploration. This patch rectifies the situation by ensuring that the URL printed in the terminal the user to access the UI directly in just one step. Technically, the approach prototyped here uses HTTP basic authentication on a new endpoint, auto login, only when this endpoint is used only by Cockroach. Here is a spectrum of alternative approaches that could be selected instead. Continue to use auto login, but restrict its availability to just the demo process. The auto login is also to non-demo clusters. So this could potentially another is to support user password as part of the URL pass or query arguments instead of HTTP basic auth. Okay. Use HTTP, what is called the other name? Digest. Change. This is a CLI change, not a UI change really. The DB console URL printed by CockroachDB upon startup can paste in a web browser directly to automatically log the user in when pasted into a web browser. So in a regular feature work, we would spend more time polishing the code and also adding testing. But because the design is not yet complete or decided, so to speak, it's too early to invest too much time into writing the testing code. This is really MVP. And therefore, we're going to create it as a draft PR instead of a final PR. And it's going to be an MVP. The reviewer are going to be Aaron and Woods and E. Cool. And the draft. For today, I might want to have a screenshot for clarity. Cool. So that was it. We have made a lot of progress on both issues we were set to address today. The first one is more or less fixed. The second one is has a prototype up for discussion with some open questions that now have some context to be answered. And that pretty much closes it for today. Thank you for watching, and we will see each other again next week. Thank you all. Have a very good day.